John Paino, production designer of Sirens. Very nice to sit down and talk with you.
Oh, thank you for having me on your show.
So I want to start off with a question. You obviously you worked on Big Little Lies historically, and you had received a lot of award nominations for that work, which is, particularly over season two, which love that world of Big Little Lies. Now you're on the sort of that's West Coast, Monterey wealth and prestige. Now you're in the world of East Coast wealth and prestige on this sort of mythical island that is a blend of Nantucket and Martha's Vineyard.
Yes.
In terms of style, in terms of architecture, what are the major differences that we can expect between those two properties?
Well, in New England, they would, I mean, it's going to sound funny, but in New England, they have more traditional New England style, federal style, what's coming from colonial architecture. And that, like a salt box, very, very simple structures. When I started to dig into this in the New England, I grew up in New York. What can I do with this? And how do people who are, their summer homes, how do they embrace that? What kind of, how can we show what the character is like, but also take it up, wasps on steroids, basically. How do we show that? But we still, when people see a show about Nantucket or the New England, you got to have the cedar shakes. You got to have the traditional, kind of eyelash windows. And we embraced all of that. But we looked at how architects and interior designers who are more postmodern, but still do residences, how they incorporate classical architecture, actually not even classical architecture. I want to also say that I looked at classical Greek architecture because of the obvious influence, because of in the storytelling, the influence of that. How do I show that without having plates from the Greek diner and that kind of thing? So it was a really interesting show in the sense I wanted to be modern. I have a bunch of people who are oligarch rich. I have New England tradition, and Peter's the husband comes from old whaling money, and I have Michaela, who's going to hire the best interior designers in the world and is making a showcase house to have parties on our mythical island, and she's some kind of Greek goddess, and so all of that was a really great melting pot to work with. Just as it's a hybrid house.
Yeah.
It's almost unlivable, but it is livable. It's for showcasing, but it has elements of Greek architecture in it. It has a lot of traditional designs in it, but we have simplified them in a kind of postmodern world. The architect and interior designer I looked at a lot was Michael Graves.
Mm-hmm.
And he does a really interesting thing with classical details. And I think he's really good at taking something like a column and blowing out the proportions and simplifying it and giving it a modern texture. And that's what I tried to do with the design of the house.
One thing that I noticed that was, yes, these are two wildly different styles between Monterey, California, and the more traditional, as you say, New England sort of salt boxy estates on this island. One thing that is similar, though, they both love windows, tons of glass, tons of open air. I guess that's to let in the light, let in the beach, let in the atmosphere there.
Yeah, and in California, Monterey, there's that is more live work outside, right? Mm-hmm. There's because of the climate. Glass in our show of Sirens had two metaphors. Traditionally, actually, if you look at artwork about Sirens, it's very Greek inspired, but in the Renaissance painters showed Sirens as being obsessed with their reflection and obsessed with shiny things and looking at themselves. So I know Molly, the showrunner, and Nikki, the director of the pilot, loved that idea. So we had glass all the surfaces practically in the house are shiny to some degree, and there's a ton of mirrors. But getting back to the architectural styles, that is something in common, and it's also for the view as well. And you have this thing about sailors looking out into the ocean and sailors' wives waiting for their wives to come back. I'm sorry, their husbands to come back. Traditionally, would be men. And at one point, we were actually going to have a widow's walk on
Hmm.
top of our house, but we traded it for Peter's lookout.
Right.
But things in Monterey and Carmel are much more. We're showing the materials, um, and we're embracing that. And I think with our Sirens house, certainly a lot of traditional architecture there. There's just going to be painted and treated because of the environment is so much harsher, and you have winters and things like that. Um, but I think in LA, I mean, sorry, Monterey, you have more of a people are used to living outside and, you know, eating outside and working, there's more of a passage through the houses and creating it. Also with our house, it's almost kind of like a hybrid again of a, traditional seaside, a traditional home, a colonial home, but it's not McMansion, but it's bordering on fantasy world with all the turrets
Hmm.
and the additions. And the idea is if I have three windows, I want to have 10 windows.
Right.
It's almost like I thought of it almost too like a layer cake. Like I've got like just like a cake and more and more and more. And there's belvederes. Well, we're gonna have three belvederes and we're gonna have a turret. So it's just kind of like that. But in a perfect world, I wanted to feel the old house. Actually, we did have at one point a point, if you look at the wide shot of the location that we built upon to make it bigger, and then we did set extensions and VFX.
Hmm.
Off to the side, there's an older house. So there was going to be a sub-story of that's the original, uh, the old money house, and then they just expanded on this land, which we did a little scouting on the Cape, we ran into a lot of houses that you could tell, okay, this is the old part of the house. And they just started building on top of it like a layer cake.
Right.
So that was not that's not too far from fantasy world.
Yeah, I was going to ask too because the Kiki and or Michaela played by Julianne
Mhm.
Moore and Peter played by Kevin Bacon. Michaela is his second wife. So I was wondering, as you look at that house, did you conceive of that within your designs? Would she have made changes
Oh
above and
yeah,
beyond the first
I
wife?
think the house is all kind of all Michaela. Why
Okay.
the brief was also that Peter, he's out making deals. He doesn't spend a lot of time
Right.
there. And that's why he has his man cave, because he's just, his man perch or his man lighthouse. And that's why he feels so comfortable in the scullery kitchen. And he'd rather sit in there than sit out in that outrageous, menagerie of Kiki's collection. Because she's collecting people, she's collecting objects, she's a collector of lost souls, which again harkens to the myth of the sirens to some degree. Um, so we didn't really talk much about the first wife. We wanted it to be like, this is Kiki's world, really.
Right. Well, it's the pervasive mystery as to,
Yes.
who was this woman, what happened to her, all of
Yes.
that. So
Yeah. I don't think we wanted to give away. There's no like Easter eggs like, oh, that's from the
right,
first one.
right. One of the things I love about this house is, obviously, as you look at the exterior, it looks of a certain size. It is very large, especially with the stuff that was added on to make it look even larger, mythical esque. But you go inside, it's so cavernous that it almost looks like these rooms can't possibly be contained inside that house. Was that by design?
Yes, it is a bit of the like The Shining.
That's
So if you
exactly
make
what I was
when
gonna.
you go now The Shining, I mean, I think our house was kind of as big as, part of the Overlook Hotel. But I love the idea that and no one, we really, okay, the windows make sense. The windows,
Right.
we've added the windows, all the fenestration makes sense from the location to the set.
Mhm.
But we also wanted it to feel like, have you ever been to a museum before closing time, like the Met, and you're just walking through and there's just shafts of light going through it, and it's eerie and empty. We wanted it to feel like, and also like the Winchester House. Like
Mm.
they just kept adding rooms. We at one point had Simone is looking, oh, I forgot. Is Simone,
Devon is the one that Simone is
yeah,
the
Evan is
assistant, and
looking,
Devon
is
is the
trying
new
to
one.
find, she's trying to find Simone's room. She's
Yes.
like, she's completely, I don't know where I'm going. We also had a lot of niches and things like that. Is this leading to a door? Is this leading to another part of the house? So it very much, you nailed it. It is very much like that, a little bit. It's almost like it's just a museum showcase. And also when there's a scene when Simone comes for her interview,
Hmm.
we wanted that to be like, like Xanadu, like everything's covered in things in it. And that atrium walkway that fills up the entire house, we wanted that sense of that. So it very much, you got it. That was very much intentional.
And talking about Simone's room, I know a lot of this is set deck, but that room feels like it's of a totally different world than the
It's
rest
like
of the house.
yeah, it's the daughter's room almost like,
Yeah. Yeah.
and it's also, okay, she's kind of drank the Kool-Aid, so to speak, as far as the Lily Pulitzer. And
Hmm.
this is so different from her other world. She went in, balls to the wall, if I may say that
Yeah. That's
but
totally
that's
fine.
it. And also Michaela is it's a trap,
Yeah.
and it's like, oh, and she likes it. This is so life affirming
Yeah.
for her. And there are nods in there to her going to Yale. We have a bit of her stuff in there. You'd have to look for it, but it's definitely there. And she is the house organizer and the party planner on her desk. We gave her, here's the calendar, here's the silverware for, this function or that function or the white party. We looked at a lot of things like the white party that they have in the Hamptons. And so she's, if you look on that desk, you'll see she's planning out the dinner, the table settings and all of that stuff and the flowers and all of that. So, yes, that is a separate little fantasy area in there.
You talked about obviously Michaela being that Greek goddess, that siren bringing in lost souls.
Mhm.
In the beginning, it does feel that there's a concern that this is a cult, and that Devon, played by Megan Fahey, her sister Simone, who works for Michaela, there's a concern that she's been pulled into this cult. But you underscore that with all of the birds, right? Michaela loves birds deeply. A lot of there's obviously tons of birds within the set deck. There's bird artwork. Kind of how else are you reinforcing this theme, this maybe cult or this collection of souls theme through the design?
That's a really great question. I think it's I've been in rich people's homes and I've just seen weird things that are
Hmm.
non sequitur that make you go, oh, okay. And you feel a little like the backs of the hair on the back of your neck. We wanted that a bit with some of the more macabre, but all nature and all related to her. I asked Molly, you know, how much is the Raptor Center put on? She said, no, no, Michaela cares about these birds, just like that's the thing to humanize her. So she doesn't come off as this is obviously a cult or anything like that. It's the other people's behavior and their embracing of it. I mean, it's just also there's just the outrageous element of her scepter and all this fun stuff. But um, there's a lot of bird stuff because it's important to her. And there's also just I mean, it's just reinforced. There's Ross Bleckner's, there's Al Katz paintings, there's all of that. But yes, this person um, is very much, that's an important part of her life. And I also took some of it from a rich person's house I went to. His wife somehow got enamored with an interior designer that just stuck stuffed little songbirds on all of these things because they ran an animal rescue center.
Mm.
I thought like Michaela doesn't make her own art, but she's kind of making art here. She's making this museum. And so let's put that into, she can't make the art, but she can buy the art. She can buy the things like this. And it is a
Well,
showcase. It is that too. It's
absolutely.
yeah.
I want
And
to go
just
back to, oh,
for the
sorry, go ahead.
parties. No, no, no. I'm sorry. I just want to say it's also the places to throw the parties for
Yeah.
her organ, for her Raptor Center. So, you know, but yeah, go ahead. I'm sorry to interrupt.
No, you didn't at all. I want to go back to Peter's space. So he has the cupola or the
Mhm.
piece on top of the house. He's
Yeah.
not in the house, right? That is his space. It is away from sort of the madness of Queen Michaela
Yes.
and her interior. Did you design that as if that was always there, depending, no, regardless of who he was married to? Did she touch it? And was it always his? Kind of what went
I
into
think
designing that space?
I think the idea is that it's again a hybrid, right? The houses we saw some houses and I've seen houses with turrets in it. They'd more traditionally have a widow's walk or a captain's thing on the top
Hmm.
of that was actually impractical to shoot in and very expensive to put scenes on a platform at the top of a gable. So I think that that's something that Michaela had built into the house, but again, it's a hybrid version of New England. And it's also just, he is the guy who's like, he's the big cheese and he
Hmm.
has this thing and he's watching everything. So it was just Michaela's kind of hybrid, kind of like the anchor, right?
Hmm.
Overstatement. Now, it's possible that an anchor that big would come off a whaling boat, let's say. Maybe not. It's like 40 feet long. But again, I could see Michaela, and we built that. That was so much fun. I can see Michaela going, honey, you know, I'm gonna honor your heritage. I'm gonna get a giant anchor made. Because when we scout places in New England, I don't know if you've been to New England, there's anchors everywhere on a lot of lawns, right?
Hmm.
And it's just a classic, like a column. It's just a classic thing. But if you notice, the barb on the end is talon shaped. So again, this is Michaela. I think that maybe there was a turret up at the house, but it certainly wasn't that tall. Michaela had an architect recreate this. I want a place for my husband to look out on the sea like his ancestors.
Yeah.
So it's all of those things. But I think Michaela thought, oh, he would like this. And he's like, okay, great. As long as I can, you know, be up there. And it's also you have to walk upstairs. You have, it's a nice way to separate it, but to show him he's really watching everything.
Right.
Might
And
be more control than you think.
the man overseeing it all. Yes.
Yeah.
And the space feels like you talked about his heritage and her wanting to honor his heritage. Space feels like it was designed by someone who imagines this is what a New England man would like. Lots of hard dark wood,
Yes.
the magnifying glass, this instruments of manhood in this space. And
Yeah.
he just seems to just sit there and smoke, and that's it. Doesn't interact
Yeah.
with
He just
anything.
wants a place to smoke dope, like
Yep.
basically, and just, hang out and, maybe the smell doesn't go in the house. It is a typical kind of place for that. And there's only two chairs. In fact, at one point, actually, there's one chair in there. And I think at one point he drags a chair or two out onto the landing.
Mhm.
But yeah, it's also again a stylized representation of all of that. It almost looks well, we did want there was a question of how old is this, right? You hit it on the head. How old is this? There are parts of it, and because it's, TV, we may not see that, where you can see there's inlays and everything, and it feels quite old. But it really we really looked at how they kit out shells and things in yachts.
Mm.
And that was also a big part of it because again, a real, if it was a real old lighthouse or it was a real old observation thing, like a Belvedere, which would it wouldn't have all those nice shelves and everything. So we took the designs from New England lighthouses, but we gave it the inside of a yacht. I
Mhm.
feel like that's been custom kitted out. And that again, an architect would do almost like Ralph Lauren takes a lighthouse and makes it, posh.
Yeah, that makes a
You
lot of sense. Um, you talked about the kitchen too briefly, but I got to go back to the kitchen because I love the kitchen and I love the size of the kitchen. I love its utility because my wife and I redesigned our kitchen a
Oh
couple of
yeah.
years ago. But what I love about it too is, and this plays in at the end, there's like a bizarre staircase that just like dumps right down to the kitchen that you don't
Yeah.
expect to be there, kind of.
Oh yeah. But you know what that is? Actually, in these old houses, you'd have a wing where the maid and the
Yeah.
butler and the guy who drives the car, the driver, and all the cooks they'd be in the other part of the house, and they would have a separate staircase
Mhm.
that leads to that kitchen. They would never go through the main house. And that kitchen is a little bit like a British, like a scullery kitchen.
Mhm.
There's nowhere to sit. It is, of course, Michaela has had someone turn it into, gobsmacking beautiful thing, but it's essentially a place for the cooks to make all the meals for all the galas. Like I went into, again, some houses, you'd go into these, it's typical, right? You go into a house these days, the kitchen is like, on high wattage, right? And again, I went into a lot of old traditional homes on the Cape, and why are there four dishwashers in this kitchen? Obviously, they have huge parties
Yeah.
and they have walk-in, we didn't want to have this, but they have literally walk-in ice boxes.
Right.
This house is to throw galas. And so there's a bit of that, but it's very, very nicely, of course, made over. But I did want it to still have its scullery roots. And there's still bits of the old house there. If you see, there's a few I-beams left that are all raw wood, and there's a bit of that there. Um, and it's also where Peter feels comfortable. He's like, no, I'm
Mhm.
gonna coffee in here. It's more, it was part of the house, but it's been enlarged and renovated.
Right. Last question for you. What was the
Sure.
most challenging aspect of the show to design?
I think it was the house because
Yeah.
the house on the outside is a big barn. So how do we make a staircase? How do we make it feel, we want it to feel cavernous and unreal, but we also have to support everything. And we want the fenestration to somehow, so we took a long time to figure out how do we have a big vaulted place. And then we came up with the idea, let's have columns. Let's have it's almost like a church in a certain sense. You have a long atrium walk
Mhm.
inside, and you have an outrageous center room. That's 40-foot tall ceiling. So that was just hard to figure that out and work with the fenestration at the location because the location, we were stuck with their breezeways on the side and all of that. So, and then how do we make that feel like a cavernous museum place and satisfy all these things in the script and do parties? And of course, then the mechanics of shooting and lighting. And so that was because the house was, is it more than 10,000 square feet?
Wow.
So, that was, and also just literally supporting it, because
Mhm.
we um we want to move walls a lot, right? So if you're moving walls, you can't, just take things away that are supporting another structure on top. So it actually gets quite complicated. And we wanted to have more of the upper floor built into the set, but of course we took some of that away on another stage
Mm.
because because of the cost of floating an entire second floor above a set for practical reasons and things like that. But we did actually have quite a bit of it. You could get to the staircase. You'd cut to their bedrooms and Michaela's bedrooms, but you could get to hallways that would give the illusion of going to her bedroom, her dressing area, and Simone's, through cinema magic, just hallways.
And I love that you mentioned like the Shining, because that's exactly what I thought about it when I was watching it. I was like, because you've seen that documentary, I'm sure, where they're saying logistically this place cannot exist inside the hotel.
No, and nobody, it's possible enough because of, they didn't show it's believable in a supernatural sense, and we wanted our show to have that sense of the uncanny and just a little bit off, like a 40-foot anchor, like all those weird sculptures. At one point, we wanted to have weird sculptures hanging in the trees and in the thing, but it's like finding that balance of the reality and the uncanny, perhaps not real. And I think The Shining is a really great example. I don't think anyone goes, "Oh, that can't possibly." I mean, look, it's so meticulously made that you just go with it,
Right.
Because of the acting too, and a lot of other things. But
absolutely. Well, John, I love your work on Sirens. Thank you so much for the time. Beautiful sets, beautiful designs. I love production design. So
Thank you. I love that you brought up The Shining, because that means that you have an eye. You've got it. You get it. Yeah.
Well, thank you.
You're the first person to do that too.
Oh, wow.
Well done.
Well, it was on my mind once I really kind of started to take a look at this.
From the best.
All right. Excellent. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Have
a good one.
You too. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.